Have you ever just stopped and, really wrestled with that question? Who am I? I mean, really, not just like your job title or your name, but what you are at your core.
Hmm. Or even what this whole reality thing is, how
Mhm.
much of it is out there and how much is, well, shaped by our own minds.
Exactly. And in this world today, it feels like there's just this constant flood of information, right? Everywhere you look, something's grabbing for your attention. It's easy to feel a bit lost, searching for some kind of clarity.
Yeah, a deeper understanding of yourself, of existence.
Okay, so let's really try and unpack this today. We're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating conversation. It's from the book Path of Beauty, specifically chapter 6, which is titled Existence and Presence.
And the source itself is quite unique. It's presented as a dialogue between these two figures, Isla and Sura.
Right, and they offer this incredibly rich, maybe even, paradigm-shifting perspective on consciousness, the ego, imagination, what it means to truly be.
Uh-huh. It challenges our everyday assumptions.
It really does. It's like a shortcut almost to getting your head around a very different way of looking at ourselves and, well, the universe.
So our mission here, for you listening, is to pull out the most important nuggets from this, well, pretty dense philosophical exchange.
We'll guide you through it.
Yeah, we'll navigate these concepts, things like the volitive soul, the real nature of the ego, which is often misunderstood,
Definitely.
the power of creative imagination, as the text calls it, and this really profound idea of presence.
We'll look at how these aren't just abstract ideas, how they could genuinely change how you see your own identity, your interactions.
Your whole relationship with the world around you.
And seriously, this isn't going to be some dry lecture. We're talking real aha moments here.
Hopefully. There are some surprising ideas in here.
Things that might make you pause, rethink. We really think it's a conversation that could open up how you see things, on a deeper level.
Moving beyond just thinking about it to maybe feeling and understanding it differently.
Okay, let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So the dialogue kicks off pretty quickly with Isla asking about this concept of mimesis.
Right. Mimesis is basically imitation or representation.
And she connects it to the relationship between life, capital L, and the world. She asks, is it the organism itself, like a plant, an animal, or even us, that directs this sort of mimetic dance?
It feels like an intuitive question, doesn't it?
Totally. It
Yeah.
connects right to how we feel every day, like I'm the one making choices, I'm the one doing things. It seems obvious it's the organism directing.
It does seem obvious from our usual perspective, focusing on the individual me.
Hmm.
But Sura, right away, flips that. Sura says, no, it's not the organism in that isolated sense.
Okay, so what is it then?
The true director, according to Sura, is something deeper, more pervasive. The volitive soul.
The volitive soul. Okay, what exactly is that?
Well, it's described as operating simultaneously in the world and in the organism. So it's not just inside you, and it's not just outside you.
It's both.
It's both. Think of it like a universal intelligence, maybe, or a fundamental will that's just inherent in existence itself.
Like an underlying current.
Exactly. A current flowing through absolutely everything, atoms, galaxies, and also through you right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just your personal will, it's the will of the universe expressing itself through all these different forms, including us.
Wow. Okay. And how does it do that? How does it operate?
Sura explains that it's constantly generating these centers of centriverse.
Centers of centriverse.
Yeah. You can picture them as points where energy, consciousness, and this formative will sort of come together and focus.
Yeah.
Like a whirlpool forming and flowing water, it's a center of organized motion.
Okay, I think I get that image.
And these centers are where the volitive soul actually manifests its directing power. And here's the key principle Sura gives. The center with the greatest mimetic energy of order, or put another way, with the greatest capacity for consciousness, will direct.
So it's not about like brute force, but about coherence, consciousness.
Precisely. It's the highest capacity for organization and awareness that guides the unfolding. The most conscious expression leads the way.
That's a really different way of looking at things, isn't it? Compared to how we usually feel.
It completely shifts the focus.
Because when you make a decision, even a small one, it feels like it's your will, your choice. But this suggests what? That our personal decisions might actually be echoes of this bigger universal will.
It prompts you to ask that, definitely. Where does the action really start? Is that gut feeling, that strong intuition you sometimes get?
Yeah.
Is that the volitive soul nudging things along rather than just some random thought popping into your head?
It makes you wonder about agency about where I begin and this volative soul ends, or if they even do end.
Right. It challenges that whole idea of the isolated self being the sole driver. It invites you to see yourself more as an expression of this larger conscious universe.
Like being an instrument in a huge orchestra. You play your part, but the music itself has this grander intelligence behind it.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So, okay, if the volative soul is this deep underlying director, this universal current, then here's where it gets really fascinating for me, because the conversation moves straight to the ego.
Right.
If the volative soul is the real driver, what's the ego doing in this picture? What's its role within these centroversion foci? We tend to think of the ego as, well, as me. Solid. My thoughts, my feelings.
Or identity, yeah.
But the text seems to suggest it's much more dynamic than that, and maybe less personal.
Absolutely. And Sura prefaces this whole discussion with a really crucial point about the nature of their own words.
What's that?
They mention the mental narrative character of their speech. They acknowledge they're using language, which is inherently dualistic. It's subject, object, good, bad, me, you.
Right. Language chops things up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're using it to describe something that ultimately transcends duality. Sura calls their words dual approaches of thinking to deeper soul movements.
So the words are like pointers, not the thing itself.
Precisely. Their goal, they say, is to show the phantasmagoria of dual thinking, like the illusion or the fragmented nature of our ordinary thought, in order to activate a non-dual form of thinking-feeling.
To help us see beyond the fragmentation.
Yeah, to reveal the basic harmony underneath it all, the harmony that gives meaning to what they call the tripartite soul that we call the universe. It's like using a map, knowing the map isn't the territory, but hoping it guides you toward understanding the territory itself.
Okay, that's a really important frame. So within that frame, how does the ego develop? You mentioned phases.
Yes, Sura outlines two distinct phases of ego development, or ego centroversion. The first foundational phase is called system autopoiesis.
Autopoiesis, that sounds technical.
It does, but the concept is fairly straightforward. Think self-making or self-sustaining. It's the absolute bedrock of any living system.
Like a cell keeping itself going.
Exactly. Sura describes it as the creation of a unity of action for the various volitional forces that have found a point of harmony, a repeatable homeostatic balance.
So just establishing a stable me that can keep existing.
Right. It requires that the system of order reached is capable of reproducing itself.
Yeah.
And this primitive ego, as Sura calls it, is a minimum liminal referent.
Like a basic threshold sense of self.
Yeah, just enough self to manage the basic metabolic processes needed to stay alive in relation to the environment. It's not self-aware like us, but more like a functional, this is me staying alive boundary.
Got it.
And crucially, Sura emphasizes this isn't just like a mindless repetition of chemical cycles. It's a dynamic of physiological processes that mimetically tests, on a continuous basis, the validity of its formative structure, correcting it at each step.
So there's an intelligence there, even at that basic level, adapting.
An inherent adaptive intelligence, yes.
Yeah.
And here's the connection back. Sura says that autopoiesis makes resonate in that isolated vital scenario all the thrust of the volative soul.
Ah, so the universal will is pushing even there.
Exactly. That volative soul, which is the unfoldment of an implicate order of the universe that we call life, is powering this basic self-maintenance and adaptation. It's pushing life forward, even at this biological level, setting the stage for the emotional and thinking realms to develop later.
Wow. So it's not just about surviving, it's about this deeper purpose, this volative soul expressing itself, even in a single cell, that connects the tiny to the huge.
It really does. It suggests an inherent drive in life itself.
Okay, so that's phase one, the basic autopoietic ego. What's phase two?
Phase two builds on that foundation. It's the formation of species-specific ego. So, for instance, the animal ego develops within that autopoietic environment. It achieves a more developed emotional soul and a limited thinking soul.
Allowing for more complex behavior, learning.
Right. But the specific difference for the human ego, the thing that really sets it apart, is its linguistic form, our deep connection to speech.
That's where the I comes in.
That's where the I emerges, yeah.
Yeah.
Along with all the grammar that lets us build complex stories about ourselves. But, and this is important, Sura stresses, that even this linguistic self-narrating ego is still profoundly conditioned by those deeper, basic, autopoietic forms, volitional and emotional.
So it's not just floating on top of language, it's rooted in our biology and basic drives.
Deeply rooted, yes.
Now that connects to something the text says that really resonates with, like everyday experience. It describes creating meaning, establishing the I as being like making a clearing in the Uroboric forest of the unconscious.
That's a powerful image, isn't it? Ordering the chaos within.
It really is. And it says the energy released by making that clearing, sometimes called prana or chi or libido, we feel it either as joy and freedom,
That surge when things click.
or the flip side as depression and desolation when that clarity just isn't there.
We've all felt that, I think. That
Mm.
energetic shift depending on our sense of meaning or confusion.
Definitely. So what determines whether it's joy or depression?
Well, according to Sura, it's conditioned by the degree of symbolic harmonization of that ego in relation to the social ego from which it arises.
Meaning.
Meaning, how well does your personal sense of self, your I, align with the myths, the values, the stories, the myths and rites that give identity to your social group, your culture?
So it's about fitting in, symbolically.
In a sense, yes. How well your personal narrative resonates with the collective narrative. This energy released by the I then becomes a sign of identity of the incipient consciousness. Its quality reflects that social harmony, or lack thereof.
That's fascinating. Our inner feeling states are tied to our place in the symbolic web of society.
Deeply tied.
Yeah.
Which leads Isla to ask this really insightful question. She asks, is the ego another kind of sensory organ? But not just any sensory organ, a social organ at the service of the human soul.
A social organ.
Really?
That's a different way to think about it.
It is. And Sura affirms this. They suggest the ego functions like a language of a higher level than that of the senses of perception. It operates in a world that is already symbolic, both socially and naturally.
So it's not just taking in raw data like sight or sound, it's interpreting meaning.
Exactly. And its capabilities go far beyond simple sense perception. Sura says the action domains of the human ego encompass emergent symbolic properties that cannot be compared with the perception filtering of the senses.
Okay, like what? Can you give an example?
Sura gives a brilliant one.
Yeah.
Fire. Our senses perceive fire as heat and light, right? A physical phenomenon.
Sure, you feel the warmth, see the flames.
But the human ego, through narrative, gives it so much more dimension: volitional, emotional, mental, and supramental soul dimension. We talk about emotional heat or cold mental reflection. We talk about light, capital L, in contexts where our senses might just see destruction.
So we layer symbolic meaning onto the raw perception.
We bring the experience much further into worlds of emerging meanings. The ego, as this symbolic interpreter, allows us to build these complex, shared symbolic realities that define human culture.
That completely reframes the ego. It's not just me, my personal self. It's the way we connect to this vast symbolic universe we all inhabit.
Precisely. It's the gateway. And this leads to another crucial point. If you understand the ego non-dually in this way,
Yes.
then it's no longer an enemy of the spirit, but its instrument, our instrument.
Which is the opposite of what you hear in a lot of spiritual circles, right? The whole kill the ego idea.
Exactly. Here, the ego, understood correctly, is the very tool that allows us to better understand the appearance of the transpersonal gods.
The transpersonal gods. Okay, we need to get into that. But first, that garden metaphor.
Right, the garden to Eden metaphor. Sura uses it to illustrate this. Plants become first a garden and then Eden. The ordered structure, the ego's function, leads to a higher state. And this paradise is now a metaphor for a way of life that operates without the limitations that gave rise to the ego.
So the ego isn't the end goal, but it's a necessary stage, an instrument on the way to that paradise, that way of life beyond its initial limitations.
Beautifully put, yes. It enables the journey, it doesn't block it, if understood properly.
Okay, so the transpersonal gods. If the ego is the instrument to understand them, what are they, according to this dialogue? It sounds like we're moving beyond individual psychology now.
We are. We're moving into the realm of archetypes, the fundamental forces shaping collective consciousness. Sura explains that the gods began as projections, or exterior morphisms of the human spirit.
Projections of the human spirit. What's the human spirit here?
It's defined as the fusion of the I am, that core sense of being with the human soul. Sura mentions that the ancient rishis of the Rig Veda called this spirit Purusha.
Purusha.
And interestingly, they describe the creation of the universe as the sacrifice or emanation of Purusha. So these gods aren't external beings out there, but more like expressions of this fundamental consciousness.
Manifestations of Purusha.
Exactly. And the text details 3 distinct generations of these gods, each corresponding to a different projection of Purusha and a stage of ego development.
3 generations. Okay, what's the first?
The first generation is the most primal. These gods result from the projection of the Purusha on the volitive and emotional souls. Think raw elemental forces.
Like nature gods.
Precisely. The examples given are titans, the orography, and the elements, mountains, rivers, storms, fire, as well as the sentient beings that we call plants. The raw power and feeling of the natural world itself, seen as divine projections.
That makes sense for early human experience, seeing spirits everywhere. What about the second generation?
The second generation represents a shift. These are gods of emotion and thinking. They arise from projecting Purusha onto the emotional soul and the human thinking soul. They're more ordered, often anthropomorphic.
Like the Olympian gods, maybe?
That kind of level, yes.
Yeah.
Surya uses the example of Marduk, god of the storm, but also legislator and champion over Tiamat, the serpent of chaos and primary emotions.
Order versus chaos.
Exactly. This generation often kills or subdues the first generation primal forces. And from their bodies, the world emerges. The volitive soul is objectified as a world. Order is established.
The world gets structured.
Right. And from this second generation, Surya says, the basic psychological masks of lineage and primitive economic action arise. These are the myths that structure early societies, laws, family identities.
Fascinating. So our social structures, our laws, our identities are born from these divine struggles in myth.
That's the idea. The evolution of the cosmos and the evolution of society are intertwined through these projections.
Okay, so what's the third generation?
The third generation involves the projection of Purusha on the dharmic thinking of the universal soul or Shakti.
Dharmic thinking, like cosmic law, universal order.
Exactly. These are more abstract gods, representing universal principles, higher ideals, examples. Maat, the Egyptian concept of justice and truth. Aphrodite Urania, representing love as a universal force, not just personal desire. Osiris, who transforms from a harvest god into the god of immortality.
So they embody abstract concepts, not just natural forces or social roles.
Right. And later, Surya notes, these abstract gods came to be seen as attributes or modes of the one God, pointing towards a unification of the divine. Their subtle forms are the substance of something broader, a supramental cosmos.
A realm beyond even these abstract principles.
A realm of unified consciousness, yeah.
Yeah.
So you see the progression. Each moment corresponds to an egoic development, from the basic biological ego to the social ego to this more abstract, universalizing ego. And each stage of the ego corresponds to a degree of complexity of the universal narrative.
Our inner development mirrors the evolution of our understanding of the divine. That's powerful.
It is. And it brings us back to the ego's role. Surya reiterates, the ego is not personal, but a centroversion force of transpersonality that allows its modulation into the archetypal stages.
It's the lens, the gateway.
It's the gateway that opens up the soul to the worlds of the spirit, beyond the masks of objects, world, and gods. But, and here's the limitation again, it cannot enter supramental thinking, nor non-dual thinking. Because the supramental realm is described as a reconfiguration of the purely transpersonal and transparent tripartite soul. It's a state of unity and multiplicity simultaneously, where knowing is being. The ego, which functions by making distinctions and defining things, just can't operate there. It can point towards it, but it can't enter.
It reaches its limit at the threshold of non-duality. Okay, that brings us back down to earth a bit, maybe. Isla asks about imaginal thinking and feeling. This sounds like something we all do, right?
We do. And Surya's answer is, well, pretty mind-bending. They say, it is what you are using at this very moment.
Right now, us talking, me understanding.
That very psychic action, Surya goes on, it's the psychic action from which everything that surrounds us arises, that which is identified in our languages. And the kicker, what we believe to be matter is purely imaginal.
Whoa, okay, hang on. Matter is imaginal. Our desks, our bodies.
That's the claim. It fundamentally challenges our basic assumption about a solid, external, independent reality. It suggests the world out there is much more a product of consciousness, of a collective imagination, than we usually think.
Like a shared dream we've all agreed is real.
Something like that, yeah. More specifically, this creative imagination or active imagination is described as a fluid and musical kind of thinking. Not linear logic, but more like flow.
Like jazz improvisation versus sheet music.
Good analogy. It's an inspired dual thinking that plays on the limit of identities, intentionally dissolving the rigid categories, the liminoi, that our everyday thinking relies on. It's a second-order symbolic force, like abstraction, but with this unique emotional vitality. It's alive, charged.
So it's smart and feels deeply.
Exactly. And it does fascinating things. It finds identities in the currents furthest from the ego, connecting to universal symbols beyond personal experience. It metamorphoses in a protein fashion. It's incredibly flexible, shape-shifting, and it brings forth forces from the most archaic and profound volitional and emotional soul.
Connecting us back to those deep primal energies.
Yes, but here's a crucial twist. It also delves into the more dual areas of thinking, such as geometry or logic, and reveals the creative capacity of duality.
Wait, so even logic and math come from this?
According to Surah, yes. Even our most structured, rational thinking finds its root in this creative, imaginal impulse. Duality itself, our ability to make distinctions, is a generator of forms. So this creative imagination is the engine behind all forms, whether artistic or scientific. It's the sure guide to our thinking in the world of forms.
That completely turns things on their head. Reason isn't the opposite of imagination, it's a product of it.
That's the implication. It's quite profound.
So if it's this fundamental, how do we access it more consciously? How do we activate it in daily life?
Well, the prerequisite Surah gives is very telling. It is necessary to temporarily suspend the urgencies of survival thinking.
So the constant focus on problems, planning, the to-do list, that gets in the way.
It seems to dampen it, yes. When creative imagination is active, Surah says not only our mind, but also our emotion and our volition enter into a symbolic experience of a different order from that of daily life. Your whole inner state shifts.
A different way of being.
A different way of being. And it's not just about perceiving symbols passively. It's the force for their creation and composition, too. It operates on both sides of the threshold of rational thinking, using both dual and non-dual patterns.
Bridging the gap.
Yes.
Yeah.
And critically, the creative imagination blurs, makes liminal the subject-object distinction. It starts breaking down that separation between me and the world. Ultimately, Surah connects this to awakening. Awakening in life is to expand the duality in our thinking and emotional soul to non-duality and understand in depth the movements of the volitional soul.
So engaging creative imagination is actually a path towards that deeper non-dual understanding.
It appears to be a direct path, yes.
Yeah.
A way to experience the underlying unity.
Okay, this sounds amazing, liberating even, but Isla brings up a really practical point, one I think a lot of us feel. In everyday life, with jobs, bills, responsibilities, all this instrumental reason and technical thinking that demands results, this idea of awakening to non-duality through imagination feels like a luxury.
Something for monks on mountains, maybe.
Exactly. Is it really just for a select few? Our world seems almost designed to crush this kind of thing.
It often feels that way. But Surah challenges this assumption head on. They tell Isla quite directly, your thinking continues to give credit to the identities of the masks. You think awakening is a process, with steps, conditions.
Which is how we usually approach self-improvement, right?
It is. But Surah calls this a mental representation, full of simple superstitions. The idea that you need to do certain things, follow certain rules to awaken, is itself a mask, a limiting belief. True freedom, Surah states, is simply getting rid of all the masks.
Just letting them go, not acquiring something new.
A stripping away, exactly. And here's the radical part. It's spontaneous. It happens in an instant, Surah says. When your willing or volitional soul has had enough of the simulacra of a mental life and feeling.
When you're just done with the superficiality.
That deep resonance, that exhaustion with the game, connects you to the volative soul, and boom, it happens. It was sometimes called the grace of God. It's not about effort, not about practices to stop the mind.
So you can't make it happen.
No. One sheds the mask when its transpersonal character becomes evident. It is an instantaneous intuition that does not occur by degrees. It's a sudden seeing through, a recognition that the you thought was personal is actually a universal pattern. And in that recognition, the mask just dissolves.
Wow, that's completely different from a gradual path. It's like a switch flips.
Like a switch flips. It reframes awakening entirely. Now, contrast that with technical rationality.
Right, the dominant mode in our world.
The volative soul, as we said, connects us to the natural world and shows the relativity, the limits of our human-made mental worlds and narratives. Surah argues that our modern disconnection with respect to nature is the disconnection with respect to the forces of the volitional soul.
And that leads to problems.
To what Surah calls monstrous aberrations in our lives and environment, which we then try to manage with useless repressions instead of addressing the root disconnection.
Okay. And technical rationality plays a role here.
A big one. It has proclaimed as only real that which is reproducible and repeatable in dual patterns. Science needs replication, verifiable data.
Standard scientific method.
Right. But in the world of spirit, Surah says, actions are unrepeatable. A liminal identity, a spiritual insight, does not admit repetition. It is always a new identity. This leads to that crucial distinction Sura makes.
Between liminal and liminoid.
Exactly. The reality in a lab, that's liminoid, controlled, bounded, simulated, like a perfect scale model. But the reality of the universe, that's liminal, always at the threshold, wild, untamed, constantly new, like a vast forest, never the same twice.
That makes so much sense. Technical rationality studies the model train set, not the real forest.
It's a good way to put it. It studies the glass of water, not the ocean.
So this gap between technical rationality and the universe, is it just like a mistake we made? Or is it part of a process?
Sura suggests it is part of a process, the result of a long process of representational objectification of the forces of life. And paradoxically, this resistance, this focus on the objective and material, contributes to the development of the forms, the supramental realm, by helping us overcome the old superstitious burdens that our emotional soul developed regarding objects and material representations. Our tendency to get stuck on purely material or emotional views is challenged by this rational phase.
So it's like a necessary, if limiting, stage to push us beyond older attachments.
It seems to function that way. But Sura is clear. Contemporary science and technical rationality are not necessary steps in some absolute predetermined cosmic plan. They simply show the mental-emotional path that has taken shape as our human world.
Just one possible path the human spirit took.
Exactly. The idea of necessity comes from logic, from dualistic thinking. Psychic manifestations, the unfolding of the universe, are contingencies of the free expression of the Purusha, the human spirit. It's a free, spontaneous unfolding, not a fixed sequence.
Okay, that's a really important clarification. It's a path, not the path. So why then is technical rationality often so suspicious of active imagination, especially when individuals use it? You said earlier that rationality itself springs from imagination.
It seems contradictory, doesn't it? Sura clarifies it's not a generalized suspicion, but rather a partial and restrictive one. The real fear, they suggest, is about the individual perspective than about imagination itself.
Fear of individuality.
But Sura calls this an unfounded fear, since the so-called individual perspective is always a transpersonal perspective.
Always.
Think about it. When you grasp a mathematical theorem, is that your personal thought? Or is it tapping into a universal truth?
Universal, I guess.
Right. It's transpersonal. But Sura argues the same applies even when you think about, say, the constitution of your country or your favorite sports team. The concepts, the emotions, the narratives involved are shared, collective. They aren't unique to you. Sura states it quite baldly. We experience what other humans have experienced. Our tripartite souls repeat the transpersonal forces of the universal soul in human forms. Our experience has nothing personal. It is what our species experiences. We mistake minor variations for unique personal choices, but fundamentally, there is nothing personal in the choices of thinking, feeling, and volition.
That's a huge claim. Nothing personal.
It challenges our core sense of individuality, for sure. Sura suggests the universe isn't incomplete, waiting for our new contribution. Instead, the universe is perfect and complete at every moment, and its unfolding and change are expressions of that perfection.
So what feels new to us
is merely the appearance of what consciousness put into oblivion in its universal game. It's a reemergence from the infinite potential of the universal mind, not something fundamentally novel created by us.
Wow. Okay. That definitely flips the script on individuality and creativity, which leads perfectly into Isla's next point.
About art.
Yeah. If even our individual thoughts are transpersonal, why is imagination celebrated in art but viewed with suspicion when it comes to science or explaining the world? It feels like a double standard.
It does. And Sura first reiterates, there's imagination also in scientific explanations, in the use of math, logic, geometry, the beauty of a theory, the creative leap.
Right, we covered that.
But the practical difference comes down to survival. We need liminoid identities, clear and well-defined, for practical things. Bridges, medicine, maps, we need them to be reliable, unambiguous.
Can't have an interpretive bridge.
Exactly. In those areas, imagination is considered a vital luxury, or even dangerous. The irony, of course, is that all the tools that we have developed to build unambiguous and safe scenarios are the result of a thinking that starts from active imagination.
We use imagination to build the tools that we then use to try and limit imagination's unreliability.
Precisely. Art, however, is valued for the opposite reason. It's valued for the transfiguring surprise that beauty entails, seductive and captivating. In art, fears dissolve, and our soul feels full with the reverberation of I am.
It hits differently.
It seduces the will and drags feeling and thinking with it. It bypasses the rational defenses. Sura concludes powerfully that the superiority of scientific representation explodes when music, dance, and poetry fill life with meaning, fill the soul with joy, healing the wounds of the stress of evolution.
Art restores something science can't touch.
It integrates, where science often dissects.
But Isla brings up that common pushback. Art seems childish, superfluous, a distraction when there are real problems. That whole seriousness of survival argument. Why is play, which is so central to art, dismissed?
Yeah, Sura cuts right through that. Play is a basic emotion. Without play, there is no human being.
Yeah.
It's not optional, it's essential. Think of kids, animals.
They just do it naturally.
Play and beauty, Sura says, make pain bearable. They transfigure it into something else. They connect us to something deeper that endures beyond suffering. Art actively combats that repressive force that wants to drag social life towards the meaninglessness, towards mechanization and misery.
So art fights against the dehumanizing forces.
Yes, and the game of art and imagination is nourished by that obstacle and resistance. It takes the limitations and transforms them into beauty, into expressions of the freedom of the human spirit.
It thrives on challenge.
Exactly. And here's the kicker for those who dismiss art. Those who think that art is the decorative point of view of existence are those who do not pay attention to the configurations that the art that they despise has imprinted on their soul by the mere fact of belonging to a human culture.
Meaning, even if you ignore art, it still shapes you.
Profoundly. They ignore that those who do not pay attention to art are not less transformed by it, a transformation that occurs through myths and rites that are invisible to them. Their mechanistic view does not make them immune.
They're unconsciously shaped by the very thing they dismiss.
Completely unaware of the artistic origin of the metaphors that he or she unknowingly uses in the expression of her feelings and her understanding of the world. Art is woven into the very fabric of our language and thought, whether we acknowledge it or not.
It's the unseen hand shaping our reality.
Wow, okay. That leads Isla to ask maybe the biggest question yet. Is the universe a symbol of something else?
The ultimate question, perhaps, is there something behind it all?
And Sura's answer, immediate and direct. If it were, it would not be the universe. The universe is the ultimate expression, not a pointer to something else. Sura then brings in Brahman and Parabrahman.
Concepts from Hindu philosophy, right?
Yes, and Sura clarifies they are not two different substances. They're exomorphic representations, final reference, projections, or concepts derived from our core intuitions about the I am, whether felt through will, emotion, or thought.
So there are ways we try to grasp the ultimate.
Ways we try, yes. But Sura cautions they are very limited representations, insufficient to reach a deep understanding. Regarding Parabrahman, the absolute beyond even Brahman, Sura says, we cannot say that Parabrahman is, nor that is not. Any soul movement in thinking, feeling, or willing is insufficient. It transcends all our categories.
Beyond ice is not.
Exactly. From the perspective of the pure I am, Sura explains, Parabrahman is the supreme subject for whom self and non-self are attributes. The self-attribute, pure being, is what we conceptualize as Brahman. The non-self attribute, infinite potentiality or void, is Pleroma.
Okay, that's complex.
It is. But here's the mind-bending part. Sura insists Parabrahman is also here in this very moment, and it is this duality. It's not somewhere else. It's the reality underlying the dualistic world we experience right now.
Wow. Not separate, but the ground of the separation. That idea seems to really resonate with Isla. It brings her some peace. But it's so vast. How does one settle into the joy it brings? Is there a technique? A method?
Sura immediately shuts down the method idea, echoing the point about awakening. It's not a question of method. You don't need to do anything to be what you already are.
It's inherent, not acquired.
Exactly. To settle into the joy, Sura says, you must go fully with transpersonality. Feel that life lives through you, that your choices are part of a vast chain of conditioning with nothing truly individual. When that clicks,
yes,
you awaken the witness. This witness state is where the ego withdraws helplessly and astonished, seeing the universality behind its actions and accepting its role as just part of that universality.
The I do becomes it is done through me.
Precisely. Then the mask of the witness, this observer identity itself, fades into the I am, pure being. But Sura stresses this final step must be a spontaneous dissolution, not forced by the ego wanting to achieve enlightenment.
It just happens when the witness state deepens enough. Okay. This really challenges our sense of individual free will, which leads Isla to ask, is our human makeup our emotions, our vitality, just evolutionary chance, just random mutations.
That common scientific explanation, Sewer dismisses chance entirely, calling it not a valid concept for the thinking, feeling, desiring of non-duality.
Why not?
Because from the supramental view, the view of underlying unity, the human soul, is a spontaneous expression of the universal consciousness force. It's simply one more voice in the universal symphony.
Every species, every form, a perfect note in the cosmic music.
Exactly. An infinite universe has infinite purposes and infinite harmonizations. No randomness, just intricate unfolding harmony. The human spirit, Purusha, the perfect man, is the archetype, the custodian of the human dimensions of the universe.
Holding the potential for all human expression.
Yes. And talk about a final intention for the universe. Sewer calls that parochial or local thinking, unable to grasp the infinite liminality of existence. Trying to define one purpose is just too small a frame. Understanding ourselves is an integral action of existence involving us, society, and life itself.
We're all interconnected in this unfolding.
Inextricably. Sewer then gives a more technical definition of existence from systems theory just to ground it. An object exists if it's part of a defined set with relationships.
Yes, like a piece on a chessboard exists within the rules of chess.
Good analogy. So you can talk about the existence of masks within a cultural system. They exist within that narrative framework. But by this definition, it doesn't make sense to talk about the existence of subjects as separate, isolated things.
Because persons aren't isolated sets.
There are billions of expressions of the Purusha over time. We mistake the universal Purusha for the temporary physiological corporeality, the vehicle for the masks.
Okay, that's a challenging distinction. So what about imaginal objects then? Things like ideas or mathematical points. Do they exist in this view?
Absolutely. They exist in the system in which they are defined. Sewer's examples. Geometric points exist in the system of geometry, but not in physical space-time. Freedom exists in the realm of human spiritual aspiration, but not fully in social experience, because societal masks inherently limit absolute freedom.
So existence depends on the frame of reference, the system.
Precisely. The imaginal realm, Sewer says, is the specular space, the realm of mirrors and reflections. It reveals its mental nature. It's where the object offers a mimetic image to the subject, and crucially, the subject forms itself in the presence before the object.
We become who we are by interacting with these imaginal reflections.
It's where our sense of I takes shape, yes, in relation to the symbolic world.
Okay, this whole journey, volitive soul, ego, gods, imagination, existence, seems to be leading to this final crucial concept, presence. You said the subject forms itself in presence. What exactly is presence here? It sounds like more than just being present.
Much more. Sewer defines presence as the force catalyzed by the I am. It's not passive, it's an active force. The Latin root, praesens, means being before what is.
Being before what is.
It implies positioning, a process, both spatial and temporal. It presupposes the idea of attention, Sewer says, and something being there, concurrent with that attention.
So attention is key.
Attention is the catalyst. Presence as being there, Sewer continues, involves locating two entities, typically subject and object, in an immediate space and time, one in front of the other. But not just physically in front, one as a witness of the other.
That non-judgmental observation again.
Yes, and it's a contingent, a possibility of being or not being. It's fluid. And crucially, remember the spontaneity point. Presence is not a necessary process, but a spontaneous one. There's no cause you can trigger. Attention itself is prior to the appearance of the object of attention. Presence is prior to free action.
Prior to choice. That's fascinating. If it precedes action and choice, then doesn't that mean presence emerges from silence? From a place before thought and action?
That's a very insightful connection Isla makes, yes. A deep question. Sewer clarifies, silence here isn't just lack of noise, it's a general silence of the five senses.
Which is hard to achieve because our body is always perceiving.
Exactly. Even in a sensory deprivation tank, you hear your own body. Our five senses are spontaneously open. Our body is world. So Sewer makes a critical distinction. This deep silence is not an experience.
Not an experience, why not?
Experiences belong to the soul, the realm of duality subject-object, beginning-end. The great silence surrounding presence is not the denial of an action, not just emptiness. It's distant and foreign to us. Only the most naked I am, pure being itself, can even approach its mystery.
And our minds can't grasp it.
Our psyche is not capable of processing this void or indefinite fullness. It rushes to fill the gap with mental, emotional, volitional stuff, shapes in the clouds, faces in the pattern.
It tries to make sense of it, impose form.
Exactly. which is why true psychological silence is so hard to sustain. Creative imagination kicks in, producing new forms. This happens in meditation or sometimes in trauma when liminal spaces open up and the usual mental structures break down.
And that experience can be good or bad.
It can feel like plenitude and meaning, inspiration, insight, or like anomie and chaos, disorientation, meaninglessness. Inspiration, Sura notes, isn't strictly imaginal, ego-generated, but it uses imagination to bring deeper psychic content to the surface.
So inspiration is like silence speaking through imagination, a bridge.
A bridge, yes. A psychic current initiated by the experience of silence as absence. But silence itself remains beyond experience. Sura says, the great silence cannot be experienced. It is the threshold from which the I am arises. Experiences are soul, silence is not.
Okay, subtle but crucial. The experience of silence triggers inspiration, which comes
from deeper psychological content rising to the surface, connecting to imagination but going further, into the space of the volative soul, opening up a deeper and more transparent psychic formation.
And what do we see through that transparency?
The I am, pure being. Sura calls his presence potentially terrible for the ego and its masks. If the ego resists this overwhelming power,
psychological whirlwinds, breakdown.
It can happen. Which is why Sura suggests the fact that the I am is veiled is a benign barrier that prevents the destruction of the precarious egoic individuation. The ego acts as a buffer from reality.
Our rational structures or duality protect us.
They reduce existence to a liminoid simulacrum, yes, but they also minimize the damage. They keep us functional in the face of overwhelming reality.
But when that transparency does happen, when the volative soul allows us to feel the presence of the I am, and we start abandoning the masks,
then Sura says it transduces the Numen, the great silence, Parabrahman. It brings that ineffable reality into a felt sense, an ineffable identification without name or form, beyond all knowledge.
Wow.
And just to be clear, Parabrahman is ineffable. It's beyond presence itself, beyond space and time, not even the source of Brahman. It's utterly beyond concepts.
Which brings us back to the limits of language.
Exactly. Sura concludes by reminding us that any doctrine or theory, metaphysical, physical, ethical, or artistic, is nothing more than a linguistic mask. Projections onto projections. Metaphorically, presence is the centroversion of consciousness force in a liminal field, focusing Shakti, making the transpersonal patterns liminal, open to the reality beyond form.
Where everything is itself, yet connected to everything else. What a journey, an absolutely incredible journey. Seriously, what a deep dive. We started with the volative soul, this universal will directing the dance of existence. Then we unpacked the ego, not just a simple me, but evolving from basic survival, autopoiesis, into this complex, symbolic, social organ.
A dynamic process, yeah.
We explored those fascinating generations of transpersonal gods, from raw nature forces to abstract principles, seeing them as projections of the human spirit.
And reflections of our own evolving consciousness.
And that mind-bending look at creative imagination, the force shaping even our logic, the bridge between dual and non-dual.
The engine of reality, in a sense.
We tackled awakening, not a long slog, but a spontaneous shedding of masks when the volative soul has had enough.
Getting rid of the illusions instantly.
Contrasted that with technical rationality, its uses and limitations, and the unseen power of art to transform us unconsciously.
Even those who ignore it.
And finally, touch the edges of ultimate reality with existence, Parabrahman, and how presence acts as that spontaneous gateway back to the pure I am, emerging from the great silence.
It covers a lot of ground, that's for sure. And it really leaves you with things to think about, doesn't it, for you listening? After hearing the ego described not just as personal, but as a social organ, shaped by culture, and this whole idea of masks, these universal roles and identities we play, how might that shift how you see your identity, the roles you step into every day?
Does it make you question what's truly you versus what's a pattern playing out?
Exactly. What feels personal versus what might be a larger transpersonal current moving through you. It's something to sit with.
And maybe consider that really profound idea Sura mentioned. The universe is perfect and complete at every moment, and its unfolding and change are expressions of that perfection. What if new ideas or experiences aren't truly new, but just, as Sura put it, the appearance of what consciousness put into oblivion in its universal game?
A reemergence from infinite potential.
So how might experiencing more presence, that spontaneous focused attention, that connection to what is, and connecting, even just for a breath, with your own volative soul, how might that change your relationship with the world, with yourself, with that deep sense of I am.
It's an invitation, isn't it?
It really is an invitation to continue your own deep dives, maybe just by pausing, breathing, and allowing for that spontaneous presence to arise. Just for a moment, see what happens.